When does a woman start missing you after you've distanced yourself? Stage 1. Anger. At first, she feels angry. Her thoughts might be along the lines of, "Oh, so that's how you're going to treat me? Fine, let's see how this plays out." Stage 2. Actions speak louder than words. If your relationship still has some resilience, things might not escalate immediately. You both could start gradually distancing yourselves, communicating less, possibly even ignoring each other. However, if the relationship is already strained, things intensify. Accusations, mutual blame, talks of breaking up, or even temporary separations, such as staying with friends or family, may begin to surface. Stage 3. Calm reflection. As emotions settle, she starts to reflect. Looking around, she thinks, "What have we done, and is there a way to fix this?" At this point, she begins to recognize the positive aspects of the relationship that still remain. Stage 4. Rekindling connection. Only at this stage does your importance in her eyes start to grow again. This is when she might take steps toward reconciliation. The transition from the third to the fourth phase is crucial because, before this point, the relationship is primarily going through a phase of breakdown. This process highlights the emotional journey of a woman after distancing occurs, emphasizing the importance of patience and understanding during these stages. What is the mistake most good men make? The mistake lies in how men often handle a woman's intense reactions during the second phase of conflict, when she raises the stakes with threats or ultimatums. A man's instinct is typically to focus on avoiding the worst-case scenario, such as the prospect of living apart from his children. What does he do in this situation? He tries to reconcile and resolve the conflict as quickly as possible. But where does this lead? Initially, this approach may work. It might even work a few more times. However, the real problem is that the man prevents the relationship from reaching a critical emotional stage for the woman. This stage is where she can recognize her mistakes, apologize, reflect on the consequences, start to miss him, reevaluate the value of the relationship. This is not about male pride or stubbornness. In moments of emotional tension, the woman experiences a specific hormonal response that increases the relationship's significance in her eyes. However, if a man consistently makes peace, even when she is clearly in the wrong, he unintentionally undermines the foundation of the relationship. The psychology of distancing in relationships, how and when it works. When we distance ourselves from a woman, we're essentially trying to trigger a biochemical reaction that makes her miss the man and increases his value in her eyes. However, it's crucial to understand when this approach works, when it doesn't, and how long it takes. Early stages, no need for distancing. In the beginning, relationships rarely require distancing. Everything flows naturally. But a turning point eventually arrives. The woman no longer rushes to reconcile. She appears calm during conflicts, chatting with friends, smiling, and showing little concern about the tension in the relationship. When to start distancing? At this stage, it's essential to wait for her unreasonable outburst or overreaction and then begin distancing. Timing is critical. If done correctly, the situation may return to normal within 7 days. However, if she remains upset for an extended period without making any effort to reconcile, the dynamics shift. The man often takes the first step or gradually resumes communication. Key problem: she doesn't apologize or acknowledge her mistakes. Resolution time: this can take at least a month, during which communication remains minimal, and both sides avoid each other. If there's no progress, calmly state, "Listen, this isn't a relationship. We don't even talk anymore. I think it's best if I live separately for a while, and we'll see how things go." This move can make her reevaluate the situation, gradually reigniting her interest. Stage of disrespect and hostility. At this point, the woman may start yelling, being rude, or showing outright disrespect. She no longer values the relationship as she once did. She stays for reasons like habit, convenience, or occasional intimacy, not love or deep emotional connection. Can it be fixed? In most cases, no. If the man clings to the relationship desperately, he only worsens the situation. Saving the relationship at this stage is exceedingly rare. Breakup. When the woman initiates a breakup, the man often feels it as a devastating loss. The psychological impact of separation can be profound. Like imagining someone far away on the North Pole, the legal and emotional reality of a breakup intensifies feelings of loss. What to do? Distancing at this point begins after the breakup. Important, don't let go of the matter completely. If she's the one ending the relationship, she must take full responsibility for its dissolution. Why mirroring negative actions in relationships is a bad idea. There's a common yet harmful piece of advice floating around online: mirror every negative action your partner takes in the relationship. For example, if she shows disrespect, raises her voice, becomes less caring, goes on a trip with friends, ignores or even deceives you, the suggestion is to respond in kind, to make her feel the consequences of her behavior. This is supposed to make her realize her mistakes and change. But this approach is completely absurd. Why I never used this strategy. When a woman makes a mistake in a relationship, it grants the man additional authority. It gives him knowledge and confidence in his moral high ground. Even if, in the moment, she denies her actions, disagrees, or tries to justify herself, it doesn't matter. The most important thing is that if distancing becomes necessary, the truth, and therefore, the strength, is on your side. Over time, this truth will weigh on her conscience, even if it doesn't happen immediately. Some may argue, my wife has no conscience, she won't feel guilty no matter what. But this isn't true. She does have a conscience, it's just turned off at the moment. This state is directly tied to her emotional condition. When a relationship is filled with negativity, resentment, and blame, often exaggerated but reinforced by your actual mistakes, she might convince herself that everything is your fault. Even if she betrays, lies, or devalues all the good in the relationship, she might say, "This is on you." Does this last forever? Of course not. Every instance of distancing I've experienced or practiced successfully followed the same pattern. The woman initially denies any wrongdoing and insists on her rightness. She may even say things like, "I'll never forgive you. This is the last time you'll see me." But in reality, it never ended as she claimed. When does an ex-wife start missing you? Not soon. At first, she won't just be indifferent to you, your significance to her will be in the negative. This is easy to explain. After a breakup, her goal becomes proving to herself and everyone around her that divorcing you wasn't a mistake. And she'll use everything at her disposal: self-suggestion, fake positivity, support from friends, YouTube videos, online psychologists, new subscriptions, self-help books on how to be happy, courses, and even hypnosis if needed. She becomes singularly focused on this mission. Why is it so important for her to prove this? Because the fear and cost of making a mistake are too high, way too high. So, while you're feeling down and thinking she doesn't care, you don't realize the power you have at this moment. You have nothing to fear because you didn't make the decision, she did. You can't put yourself in her shoes to understand what's happening. For 6 to 8 months, she'll obsessively try to convince herself, you, the children, and everyone else that her life is better without you. She'll wake up and go to bed with the same thought. But what happens then? At some point, often, but not always, she breaks down. It's impossible to lie to yourself forever. Eventually, her inner resources for self-deception run out, and you'll notice it. She'll begin to reconnect with you. The crucial thing here is not to fall for it. This is important because, at first, this is just a facade. It's not backed by genuine reevaluation or emotional transformation. There haven't been the buckets of tears that signify true introspection. Only after this phase does your real significance begin to grow. Here's one thing to keep in mind: don't reject her harshly. Doing so would reset everything. Your reaction should be moderate, calm, and ambiguous. That's when things will start to fall into place. Of course, there are difficult cases. For example, a recent story, a woman started behaving very poorly right after giving birth, and the situation only got worse. What should be done? To answer this, a lot of variables need to be considered. For instance, evaluate her psycho-emotional state. If there are problems, start looking for ways to solve them. Find out how much she sleeps and try to give her the opportunity to sleep well for a few days. It's important to see if her behavior improves after this. Carefully analyze the patterns of her previous relationships. Perhaps a similar situation has occurred before, where she lost interest in her partner and then left. What can be done if the relationship still exists but tension is felt? Try to provoke your wife to open up as much as possible. Use phrases like, "Speak your mind," "Don't hold back," "Say it as it is." It's important to remain as calm as possible. If this succeeds, you can be sure she will admit to things you didn't even suspect. You need to show that you are ready to listen to her and accept it without aggression or judgment. This approach helps to release the pressure, allowing her to express everything that's bothering her, which will make her feel better. For you, it will help to better understand the situation. Once the diagnosis is made, you can start acting. Example: a man decided to distance himself but took into account that the child was still young. Considering the accusations voiced by his wife, he focused on reducing her stress. The best solution was to hire a nanny to help his wife. He chose a nanny who was not only qualified but also pleasant, assuming that this might help. And you know, it worked. The situation was resolved, and they didn't even separate. In this story, the man acted in a timely manner and avoided serious mistakes. In difficult situations, a comprehensive approach is needed. First, analyze, then create a clear action plan that considers all important factors. The worst-case scenario is when a woman loses feelings for a man because of her attraction to someone else. Whether it's through communication with another man or directly leaving for him, the result is the same. Why? Because her feelings for the other man act as anesthesia. She doesn't feel any pain. She can end the relationship, destroy it, engage in conflicts, or even file for divorce without much emotional struggle. Imagine you're at the dentist, and they've worked on your mouth, removing 4 teeth. You feel nothing, thinking, "It's fine, no big deal, I didn't even notice." But what happens eventually? The anesthesia wears off. Her feelings for the other man will fade, or he might leave her. When that ends, the pain floods in all at once. At that moment, her mind begins to overflow. Every second, she experiences the full weight of the pain she previously ignored. It's a sudden and overwhelming realization that can feel almost unbearable. Memories resurface, she understands what happened, and she begins to see everything in a new light. This is an extremely difficult state, but it only becomes possible with a well-executed strategy of distancing. Without distance, or if you're still available and she knows it, or if you've reacted with resentment and negativity, none of this will work. If your wife insults you and you insult her back, you effectively nullify her mistake. She won't feel any guilt for her actions. This is a major error, especially if you attempt to initiate distancing after a heated argument where both of you lost control. In such a situation, you lack a firm sense of being in the right, and she doesn't feel like she's the one who made a mistake. This weakens the effectiveness of distancing. Distancing is not a contest to see who can stay angry longer or hold a grudge more intensely. Absolutely not. Many people ask what determines the effectiveness of distancing. One of the key factors is whether the man has tried to behave impeccably in everyday life. If he has strived to be someone who others look at and think, "Now that's a man," then distancing will work more effectively. This is because he has invested in the relationship and genuinely made sacrifices. Before starting to distance yourself, it's essential to exhaust all positive ways of resolving the problem in your relationship. Only when it's clear that no alternatives work should distancing come into play. Distancing is not a punishment. It would be a mistake to view it that way. It's a way of helping your partner, who has completely lost their sense of conscience and reason. It's about trying to make them realize the consequences of their actions. The right mindset for distancing, and how to begin it correctly, is to approach it with readiness to embrace, forgive, and forget everything right now. Completely forgive the person. At the same time, you must also be prepared for the possibility that reconciliation may never happen. Never. That's the mindset you need to have. How does an ex-wife begin to come back to you? As we've discussed before, the first phase is indifference. At this stage, nothing good happens, or nothing happens at all. The second phase takes at least 6 to 8 months. It's a shift in her emotional state. You may start to feel that she has softened a bit, become more neutral, or even slightly positive in her interactions with you. The negativity fades, and her behavior becomes less tense. The next phase is distancing and approaching. It's an unclear back-and-forth dynamic where sometimes she's kind and approachable, and other times she pulls away or lashes out. The following phase is provocation. She starts doing something, this could be either positive or negative, to provoke a reaction from you, to throw you off balance, and to see how you respond. At this stage, she is no longer indifferent but is trying to understand how you feel. She wants to know if you'll overreact, if you still care, and what emotions you're experiencing. Only the final phase involves specific actions aimed at reconciliation. A mistake at any phase can disrupt the entire process of distancing. This mechanism can break completely. For example, if, during the first 8 months, there's no communication or signals from her, and you lose patience, start arguing with her, or try to reconcile prematurely by showering her with gifts, the phase is completely ruined. Or during the second phase, when her emotions have leveled out, you think, maybe now is the time to talk about what happened in our relationship. You've blown it. Similarly, during the distancing and approaching phase, if you react emotionally or inconsistently, she'll see through you. If you fall for her provocation, things can fall apart as well. This phase is particularly difficult because it tests your ability to maintain composure. If you bluff, it will become obvious, and the dynamic collapses. Finally, regarding reconciliation. If you've been passively waiting, haven't lowered her sense of significance, and haven't done the work to regain balance, here's what happens. At the first hint of reconciliation, you eagerly grab onto the opportunity. At that moment, it becomes clear who you are and how you'll behave in the future. That's it. The phase is ruined, and the relationship dynamics are reset completely. Is it possible to regain a wife's interest before divorce while still living together? In reality, this doesn't depend entirely on you. A wife will take the first step toward reconciliation only if her outlook on life becomes unappealing to her. If she's a reasonable woman, she might start thinking, how will the children live without their father? They'll miss him. It's not right for the family to fall apart. Will the kids need to switch to another kindergarten or school now? If she's not the kindest person but at least rational, she might think, who would want me with 2 kids? Who's going to support us? Where's the guarantee that I'll find a much better man? In my observations, the possibility of restoring a relationship with your wife before divorce depends less on your actions and more on the woman's common sense. If she lacks that sense, then divorce becomes inevitable. This is because she has few internal convictions holding her back and has accumulated a significant amount of negativity toward you. For this negativity to dissipate, she might need the divorce itself. Any extreme is harmful. Let me give you an example. I love justice. But at the same time, if we constantly seek fairness in a relationship, we'll be unhappy. Why? Because we'll always feel like someone owes us something, hasn't appreciated us enough, didn't praise us, didn't look at us the right way, or said the wrong thing. The behavior of any person, absolutely anyone, contains flaws. We can categorize these flaws, for instance, into intentional and unintentional ones. I sometimes have moments, though not often, when due to stress, problems, or a demanding workload, I might react too harshly to something my wife does. And in such a situation, I can't claim to be 100% right because my emotional state shouldn't affect my wife or how I treat her. At that moment, she has only two options. Offer me tea, hug me, kiss me. Ask directly, "Why are you talking to me like that?" But such a reaction, no matter which option, likely wouldn't improve our relationship. After a couple of hours, I might reflect and think, why did I react so sharply? That was such a small thing. Now imagine, what if my wife had started arguing and demanding justice? I want everyone to understand me correctly here. If two good people, a man and a woman, meet, but both rigidly defend their sense of justice, the relationship will end poorly. Even though, in terms of facts and logic, they might both be right. That's why I firmly believe that every person deserves an attempt to be excused, at least at first. We can always escalate to a stricter response later, especially when the discomfort they caused wasn't intentional. We need to learn how to clearly differentiate between someone accidentally stepping on our toes in a relationship and someone deliberately spitting in our face. These are very different situations, and our reactions should also be different. I've noticed many times that men often react to situational conflicts on the most trivial, everyday level in the same way as if something truly significant had happened. They create unnecessary drama, turn minor issues into big problems, reacting as if their authority in the relationship is under threat. But how is it possible to have the same reaction to trivial matters and genuinely serious ones? That makes no sense. To influence a woman effectively, it's essential to calculate the dosage of distancing correctly. Here's how it works. Phase 1, this is when the distancing is light, almost unnoticeable. Your involvement in conversations decreases, there are fewer sweet words, and you minimize shared plans. For instance, you might say, "Unfortunately, we won't be able to go where we planned," and even explain why calmly. You're kind and polite, but there's little warmth, emotion, closeness, or physical affection like hugs. If she approaches you, you won't ignore her entirely, you might respond briefly or formally, but you won't initiate anything yourself. This phase requires a delicate touch and an understanding of the right balance. Phase 2, everything from the first phase continues, but the dosage increases slightly. For example, you might delay your responses to her or communicate in short, concise phrases. Phase 3, by this stage, your behavior makes it clear that something is wrong, but you avoid discussing it. You send a subtle message, figure it out yourself. The key here is to remain polite and good-natured, even as the emotional distance grows. Phase 4, this phase typically follows a severe action on her part. Imagine, for example, a husband discovers his wife has been unfaithful. She can't vanish in 30 minutes, there may be children or other obligations that require some level of interaction. In such a situation, communication is minimized as much as possible. Use the principle, why talk if you can write? Any contact is reduced to the bare minimum. If immediate total distancing isn't feasible, aim to achieve it as soon as possible while maintaining self-control. Without composure, this process ceases to be genuine distancing. The essence of proper distancing lies in maintaining calm, control, and consistency, even in emotionally charged situations. How do you distance yourself from a woman correctly? There are two classic approaches. The first is simply waiting for an unreasonable act from her and immediately, without lengthy explanations, initiating distance. The second option is to approach her if unreasonable behavior has come from you and calmly say, "Listen, there are things happening in our relationship that just don't align with what a healthy relationship should be. I don't want to assign blame or find who's right or wrong. I'm just emotionally exhausted by all of this, and you probably are too. Let's take some time apart to think about whether this is all worth it." The calmer you handle this conversation, the more effective it will usually be. Properly calibrating the distance. Before anything else, you need to determine the proper dosage of distancing. For example, someone might say, "Why isn't this working?" Then you find out that the woman just acted rudely or snapped, and the man distanced himself a little by being quieter, but still walked down the street with her as usual. She likely thinks, oh, he must have a stomachache, and doesn't realize she did something wrong. That's an incorrect dosage of distancing. Conversely, sometimes the situation is minor, and the man starts shouting about breaking up. Or he initiates distancing but doesn't follow through, so after a day, he unintentionally reconciles. And then he wonders, why did I even start? In such cases, it's better to wait for at least some effort or attempt at reconciliation from her side. If you know you struggle with emotional control, it's best to hold off on distancing because you're likely to overreact and ruin everything completely. The mistake of assigning blame. What do most men want to do? They want to make her feel guilty. But how do they try to accomplish this? Unfortunately, many think that yelling accusations, the harsher and louder, the better, will do the job. But that's not how it works. Imagine if I started accusing you of something right now. How would you feel? Most likely resistance, anger, frustration, not guilt. For someone to feel guilty, communication needs to take a different approach. You need to calmly, perhaps even with slight care and reluctance, convey the message without directly accusing them. The goal is to help the person realize for themselves that they acted unfairly. Think about this, maybe it's worth trying. Bad relationships with your wife can feel like being blackmailed by scammers who've gotten hold of your personal photos. Every time they say, pay this amount, and we won't leak them, you believe them, you pay, and then they come back asking for more. You pay again. One day, you don't pay, and they threaten you, so you give in again. At some point, it becomes exhausting. You realize they'll keep exploiting you forever, and finally, you say, do whatever you want. Something similar happens in a relationship when a wife has completely lost her love for her husband. She starts extracting gifts, trips, privileges, and improved conditions from him. You're expected to tolerate everything, overlook certain behaviors, and accept it all. The husband justifies it to himself, thinking, fine, I'll sacrifice a bit more, at least we won't get divorced. I know men like this. In the early years of marriage, they were practically on a throne, with their wives catering to them. But after 5, 7, or 10 years, the dynamic became entirely negative. You wake up one day, and suddenly your wife is seeing a psychologist, joining a fitness club, or befriending newly divorced women. The most significant sign is that she becomes chronically dissatisfied with everything. Respect? Forget about it. Now the husband faces a dilemma. He must risk everything: his property, his relationship with the kids, his emotional well-being. He'll lose sleep at night, waking up in a cold sweat from the stress. He has to put his entire life, everything he's built over the last 10 or 20 years, on the line. Or, he can pretend that everything is fine, keep smiling, and simply endure it. Interestingly, in this scenario, there is a chance the wife might not leave. But that depends on several factors. Her attractiveness. Does she have alternative options with other men? Her age. This affects not only her appearance but also her ability to have children. Her emotional intelligence. How skilled is she at manipulating men, influencing their moods, and controlling their state? Both options, risking everything or enduring it, are terrifying in their own way. I believe this is a deeply personal choice. Everyone must decide for themselves how to act and take full responsibility for that decision.